So I want to welcome everyone to Startup Stories. Sadly, this is our last one of 2021, but we'll be back next year with some exciting guests. We have one on the front row. Ed Link will be one of ours. And so we're at the UCA Makerspace today, which is powered by The Conductor, is who I'm with. I'm Miranda Daly. I'm our marketing and event coordinator. So The Conductors provides entrepreneurial support. We have an 11-county service district in Central Arkansas. We do that by one-on-one consultations, webinars, things like today, and we have some other fun events coming up before the end of the year. So today we're joined by data-driven partners, Mallory Vandover and Jennifer Carlisle. So they were founded in March of 2020, which all know is kind of the month the world went to stop. So they are determined to help clients utilize data to solve mission-critical problems and make data-driven decisions, and they designed its fintech product, Lending Leads. So between the two founders, they have years of corporate philanthropy experience at Carti, Arkansas Children's, and Arkansas Advocates, and Jennifer is retired from the Arkansas Air National Guard. And with that, I'll hand it over to y'all.
So she just took my whole first part of my introduction, so thank you, and you probably did it better. I'll start with, I'm Jennifer, that's Mallory. We are data-driven partners. At some point in time, we may grow, but we, right now, are data-driven partners. We expected to be talking to students, and we understand that there still may be some students that would watch at some point in time. So what we were originally going to talk about was more of a, you two can do this, and we veered from our paths, and that's okay, and we may still talk about some of that. So if we do some on the fly, trying to figure out how to redirect, you'll understand why. So Miranda did it. I basically, that was our very first mission statement. And it was what we still hold true to today for data-driven partners. Here in a little bit, you'll hear how we've changed because of our experience with 10X. So we were lucky and privileged to be able to do the Conductor 10X program, 14 weeks. We just ended about 3 weeks ago. We are so used to being in Conway on Tuesday afternoons that it kills us. To not be here, and I'm so close it makes me want to, drive from Maumelle.
And now that you know the Makerspace is here.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be here. I already knew it was gonna be cool, but now that I'm in here, I'm just like, help me, Mal. Where did I just?
So Miranda's right. We started Data-Driven Partners literally 1 week before COVID came to Arkansas. So most people would say the timing on that was not great, but for a business like ours that was about helping business owners evaluate their data and put themselves in a position to make data-driven decisions, it was actually perfect timing for us. Because a lot of the business owners who were in their spaces going, holy cow, how am I going to recover? How am I going to stay afloat? They actually had time to talk to us.
Yep.
So we started in March of 2020. We're obviously based in Central Arkansas. Very proud to be Arkansas natives. And we actually capitalize on the fact that we're a local vendor, and that seems to be resonating with some of our clients, that we are present and very accessible.
We also capitalize on the fact that although we are geeks, we are fun geeks.
We are super fun. You'll never meet nerdier people that are as much fun as we are. So, we're both women. Carlisle, there's nothing Carlisle cannot do. She's a retired veteran. So women and veteran owned, we're very proud of that, because a lot of times in the BI world, you don't see people that look like us. And then also along the way, our journey has shifted a lot. In under 2 years, we created a fintech product called Lending Leads. And you'll hear more about that a little bit later.
So what we kind of wanted to do right here is kind of take a step back from where we are now and just give you a little clue of how we got here. And part of why it's okay with us, and we understand why we've veered off of the path just for data-driven partners. In fact, the Conductor program is part of what helped us do it, and it was one of the best things that we ever did. So what's your story, Mal?
Yeah. Okay, so when Miranda asked us to give our startup story, I said to her, there's no way we are a good candidate for this. We have been in business less than 2 years. Our startup story is about 2 chapters long and it's still being written. She assured us that part of what people wanted to hear, especially when we're speaking to a room of students and not necessarily people that we know, by the way, no heckling from the crowd, is that our personal stories were important too, and to tell the story of where we started, how we came together, and how we landed right here. So we know a lot of you, but you're going to have to sit through a part of that before we get to the good stuff. I've been doing a lot of thinking about my personal startup. So my childhood, the opportunities that I was given, and some of the opportunities that I missed out on because of where I was raised. I've been thinking about my influencers, my 4 parents, some of my bosses like CJ Duvall, who's sitting in the audience, and some of my teachers in high school who expected more out of me than I expected out of myself. So I've been going down this long and winding memory lane as I've kind of pieced together my startup story. And I've had a lot of changes in my career path, and I call them switchbacks. So if you're a hiker, that will make sense to you. When you're climbing, oftentimes the route to the top is not straight. You have to make a lot of turns. And I think that's what I've done in my career. So we're going to tell our stories. Maybe a little boring, but it's important for y'all to know the context of how we got here. We're going to make ourselves pretty vulnerable and hope that it will resonate with you, that you'll see yourself in some of what we're saying, because part of what I would say to students if they were here is there's absolutely nothing that you can't do if you put your mind to it. So here I go. First, for context, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a therapy session. I will admit to you that I am, in all seriousness, a recovering perfectionist. So big time problems with perfectionism. And until recently, I have been deeply, deeply afraid of failure. So what that's meant for me is that my fear of failure has kept me from doing things that I know I would have enjoyed and I know I would have been good at. So my advice to any students that are watching this later or any people in the room is that I would encourage you not to do that to yourself. So don't stay stuck in that fear, and realize early in your life that when you fail, it's not really a failure, it's an opportunity to improve and move on and learn. So if anybody has that fear of failure like I did, I think we should go have coffee because I'm fun. The second thing that I want to say about myself is that I do not believe in coincidences, not one little bit. So those are the things that I want you to think about when you hear the rest of my story. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta. I'm very proud of that. I grew up in Marianna, Arkansas, in Lee County, which did and still does have one of the highest poverty rates in our state and in our nation. I went to a very small private school called Lee Academy. I had 8 people in my class. There were 181 students in my entire school, kindergarten through 12th. And as far as I know, I still hold the record for the most number of 3-pointers scored in a basketball game. So there you have it. As you can imagine, in a school that small and in a town with not a lot going on, there weren't a lot of opportunities for enrichment. We had a great community, but my academic curriculum was very, very limited. So in high school, the highest level of math class that was offered was Algebra 2. My history teachers didn't cover the civil rights movement. And I sure didn't have access to an AP class. I didn't even know what that was. So for anybody listening, students especially, if you ever tell yourself that you can't learn to do something or you can't figure something out because of where you came from or because you didn't go to some prestigious high school or have an AP curriculum, I am here to say that you can. So thankfully, even though I didn't have very many opportunities for exposure, my parents must have seen in me the way my brain worked. So they saw that for the most part, I thought logically. I really enjoyed my algebra classes, and I was a lover of processes. So my parents also knew that me as a teenager with too much time on her hands was a bad idea. So after my sophomore year in high school, unbeknownst to me, I got enrolled in a 3-week Lotus 1-2-3 class at what was then the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. So I'm dating myself. For any of you that don't know what Lotus is, it was the precursor to Excel. So I went begrudgingly because I didn't have a choice, and that's when the light bulbs went off for me. So I loved it more than anything that I had ever loved. It was like I was learning a foreign language that made as much sense to me and came as easily to me as my son when he learned Spanish. So it just clicked, and I loved it. I graduated from high school. I went to the U of A in Fayetteville. My dad expected me to get an accounting degree, consider law school after undergrad. And I think that was his way of saying to me, hey Mal, I see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And I want you to use the God-given talents that you have, and I want you to go do something with it. So after 2 years as an accounting major, the social side of me said being an accountant would not be a good long-term fit for me. So I was trying to graduate on time, and I changed my major to something completely different, computer science. I'm just kidding. I do not have a computer science degree. I do not have an IT background. I changed my degree, I changed my major to human resource management because, yes, I loved math, but I also am fascinated by people. So as for law school, I was too afraid that I would fail the LSAT, and I was too afraid that I would not get into law school that I didn't take the test. So that was the first time my fear of failure raised its ugly head, and it won. So I graduated with an HR degree. I landed my first big girl job at Systematics, again dating myself, as an HR generalist. And we went through the steps of learning about the different HR areas, so employment, employee relations, job analysis, and finally compensation. And it didn't take long for the people who hired me to figure out that that was the best fit for me. So they turned me loose with the numbers, and I did things like evaluated, internal pay practices. I studied salary surveys, and I came up with recommendations for the company-wide pay structure. I had two bosses and a surrogate boss at Systematics, John Nichols and Jim Hillis, and CJ was one of my influencers too. And they encouraged me to take the EO1 entrance exam, which was the test you had to pass to become an entry-level programmer at Systematics. And again, that fear of failure, even though I knew I could have been a programmer and I would have loved it, it kept me from taking the test. So I'm 22, and it's fear of failure 2, Mallory 0. So Systematics was acquired by Alltel. I went to Alltel. I did base pay administration for the telephone company. I was promoted to sales comp, but I designed sales compensation plans for the entire Alltel mobile sales force. And what that meant for me was more data, more analysis, more information, and more Excel. I loved it. So I got my best job ever in '97 when I became a mom to Mason. I decided to leave Alltel and be a stay-at-home mom. A few years later, my daughter Emma was born, and in the 13 years that I stayed home and raised my kids, I volunteered as much as I could. I had a little bit of a lot of things going on, but some of the work that I did was at their school, and I chaired their fundraiser to raise money for their art program for 3 years. And that's actually what led me to my next career. So I was a stay-home mom who followed her interest, who met a community leader who offered her a job in fundraising, planning events for a nonprofit in Little Rock. And that's what happened. I did that, I met the right people, and my fundraising career was launched. So the next 14 years, I was a frontline fundraiser. And you would say, well, how do you like data and then become a fundraiser? But remember, I also like people. So it was actually a good fit for me. I started in a small shop. I was a one-woman show. My career grew, and I enjoyed real specific roles at other places like Easter Seals, Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, Arkansas Children's Foundation, and Carti Foundation. So when I was at Arkansas Advocates, I was recruited to be the executive director of philanthropy over plan giving at Arkansas Children's. And when that person was recruiting me, I said to myself, I can't do that job. There's no way. It's too big. It's scary. The demands of the job will be something that I've never experienced. The learning curve would be steep. The stakes would be high. All of those things were true. All of those things were true. But that voice in my head was saying, you can't do that. So that voice had kept me from taking the LSAT. It had kept me from taking the EO1 test. And for the first time in my life, I said to that voice, you need to zip it up because I'm doing this. And I won for the first time. So I took that job, I dove in head first, I learned as much as I could learn about plan giving. And when I say learned, it was like drinking from a fire hose kind of learning. It was on the fly, it was intense, and what I was learning was interesting, fascinating in fact, complicated, technical, sophisticated, different than anything that I had done. And it was hard, and I loved it. And the reason that I loved it, because it was hard, it was sophisticated, and it was technical. So I had that job for a while. That job really reignited my intellectual curiosity, and it solidified a belief in myself. So did I tell you that I have 4 children? I have 4 children. And sometimes when you have 4 children and you have 4 parents, your family has to come first. So there were some things going on with my family that, and even though I loved what I was doing at Children's, they required my attention. And without knowing what I would do next, I left. I quit my job. But remember what I said, I don't believe in coincidences. So it was, Carlisle, I think, is going to talk about that a little bit, but it was because I was at Children's that I met Carlisle. So my family settled down. By then, some of my colleagues at Children's had moved to Carti, and they offered me a job to be the vice president of Carti Foundation. The first thing that I did in that role was they asked me to use my MAD Excel skills and to build portfolios for all the fundraisers. So what that meant is I dumped all the data out, I put it into a tool that I had actually built myself in Excel, and it looked at all the important points about a donor that would help us build and identify the best prospects. So once again, I'm in a fundraising role that's not data related, but I'm using data to do my job. And I was asked to dump the data, analyze the data, interpret the data, and use data to build a path to success for a team. So I often would say to my husband, man, I wish I could do that all the time, right? The tool that I used to do that analysis was something that I built myself and still have and haven't done anything with yet, but
Because you don't do anything.
yeah, right, I don't do anything. But anyway, every time I got in and played with that and built it more and improved it a little bit, not only did it excite me, I mean, it excited me. I talked about it with my friends as much as they would listen. I talked about it with my husband until he was just like, you've got to stop. So I guess my advice to students who might be listening is when you find something that lights your fire, that really gets you excited, I would encourage you to not ignore that, right? So I'm at Carti. I'm wishing that I could make my nerdiness my career. I'm wishing that I could help organizations that didn't have a team utilize their data so that they could make strategic, data-driven decisions instead of shooting from the hip. I like to know answers, not to wonder, and I wanted to help other people do that. So that idea of doing that stuff continued to percolate while I was at Carti, which is exactly where I needed to be for my next switchback. So my office was on the breezeway. I don't know if you've been to Carti, and cancer patients would walk by my office every day en route to get their care. I would watch that happen every day, and I would say to myself, Mal, how long are you going to wait? You're getting toward the middle of your life. You're perfectly healthy. What's it going to take for you to go do what you know you can do and you know you can figure out? So little sidebar, I met with a donor one time, and the next day his administrative assistant sent me an email, and the email said, Mallory, you really impressed him. When you left, he said that woman could be doing anything she wanted to do in her life. And of course that email made me feel great, right? That's a nice email. But it also made me ponder because I don't believe in coincidences. So I thought, why would he have said that? What did he mean? What do I need to learn about that? And about a year later, I had a meeting with another donor that I had developed a really nice relationship with. And he called me later and he said, hey Mal, if you ever want to leave Carti and you're looking for another job, I want to be the first person that you call. And I said to myself, why would he do that? I'm not in his industry. I don't know about his industry. I can't switch into another industry and learn about that. But I did pay attention to the fact that he called because I don't believe in coincidences. And then a few months later, I ran into him again. And he jokingly said, hey, are you ready to come work for me? And I declined because I didn't think that industry would light my fire, right? That's not what would make me excited. But then he said something that stopped me in my tracks. He said, Mallory, And when people say things like this to me, it burns into my memory. So this is a direct quote. He said, Mallory, you are really good at what you do, but you would be good at a lot of things. And I don't know how old you are, and I will say he didn't say it in an ugly or an ageist way. He wasn't trying to be offensive. He said, I don't know how old you are, but I know that you're around my wife's age. And if you want to be a fundraiser the rest of your life, that's great. But if you want to do something different, it's time to get started. And so, wow, that landed pretty heavily with me. And I heard him. And even though my husband had been telling me to follow my dreams for a long time, it was what I needed to hear, and it was the right time to hear it. And so I resigned from Carti Foundation. And within a week, I had filed the paperwork to start Data Driven Partners. That is a very long personal story, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah,
So what about you, Carla?
So first of all, the reason she calls me Carlisle is, let's see, I was born in the early 70s, and there's lots of Jennifer Lynn's. I think it was Love Story is the movie that caused everything. So at one point in time when I was working at Children's, there were 6 Jennifers. So all on one floor. So we began to be called by our last names. And and I was at Children's for about 11 years. I was in operations, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but basically I was one of the first stops for all new employees because they had it on their checklist that they had to come by my office and set them up on a computer and all that kind of stuff. And the first time that one of them came to my office and said, "Are you Carlisle?" I thought, it's done. So by the time Mallory and I met, that's what everybody called me, and so she calls me Carlisle, in case there's any of you who know me who wonder why that is. So as in all stories, ours is really different, but has a lot of similarities. And just real quickly, my whole point in my story is that I planned it. I had everything planned. I knew what I was going to do, and even when I changed, it was planned. And it's okay for you not to follow your plan. And I didn't know that until some things kind of fell into my lap. So you probably all can think of the person who influenced what you wanted to do when you grew up. And teachers, mentors, parents, siblings, maybe your significant other if you've grown up several times like I have. Mine was my mom and dad. My mother was in the medical profession. Not for me. Very proud of her. I'm glad I have her genes. I gave them to my daughter. She's going to do that. Not me. It was cool for science fair projects. She was a medical technologist, did gastroenterology. I had the best science fair projects. That is it. My dad was an accountant and a pilot in the military. Won't bust anybody's bubble. I did not get to be a pilot. Didn't have 20/20 vision. I really wanted to be because I'm also an adrenaline junkie. But math is my love language. So I majored in business, econ, and accounting at the other school down the street. And I joined the Guard, in the Air National Guard. And so through that process, around the time that I graduated, I decided I didn't want, although I had an accounting degree, and I started as a math degree, and wasn't sure what I was going to do with that, and then I moved to accounting because it's still numbers, and just didn't use my calculus as much. I was just talking to him earlier. I loved calculus. And then I thought, I don't want to sit behind a desk doing accounting. So I went to law school. At the same time, I got married. And true to my dad's word, if I was old enough to choose to get married, I was also old enough to pay my own way. So I worked at Pulaski Bank in the construction loan department while I went to law school at night. It took me 4.5 years to graduate, but by God, I graduated. And went straight into a career of estate planning and corporate tax. So I got to meld everything. It was perfect. At the same time, I'm having a military career, so if any of y'all are familiar with that, it's almost 2 different lives, especially if you're in the reserves and You don't even recognize yourself when you're in uniform. Your friends certainly don't. I realized about 3 years into that, I was doing what I wanted to do. It was so much fun. I'm a problem solver. So I love the numbers. I am a geek, and I'll tell you about how geeky that is, but I'm also a problem solver. It's just part of my being. And I love to do that. But I was sitting behind that desk that I didn't want to sit behind it. Now, all of the attorneys that were meeting with the clients were bringing me the information to then come up with the solutions. And so I jumped over to the nonprofit sector. And they hired me because I was an attorney, but not as an attorney, to create a plan giving program at UALR. And that was awesome because I got to do estate planning, but on the nonprofit side, I didn't have billable hours. I didn't have to mark myself out on my calendar when I was going to the bathroom. I got to do it, and I got to help people create a legacy for the causes that were important to them. Skip ahead, and during that time, when I went to UALR, I also had my 2 children, Britton and Chase, and it was great. And I thought that was going to be what I retired at, because I didn't look back when I jumped from the for-profit sector to the nonprofit sector. I never looked back, and until now, I guess. So anyway, then about 6 years later, I got a call from a friend of mine, a colleague in the nonprofit world, and he asked me to come to Arkansas Children's Hospital. And I said, no, I don't think that's the right thing for me. I know who your plan giving officer is, and I love her, still do. And so, not sure that's the right thing to do. And he said, well, that's not what I want you to do. I want you to come and be our director of operations, because I know you're a geek. And he was right. Like, the second favorite class I had in high school, my first one was calculus, my second one was programming and coding. I had, and I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the Coleco Adams. It had a dual cassette drives. It was my first computer in the early 80s. It was one of the first computers that fit into a room and not a house, right? And so my first program that I built was a biorhythm program, which I thought was the coolest thing. It put your birth date against your moon phases and told you why you were in a bad mood. And then in the military, one of my very first active duty assignments was to be a sub-computer operator at the United States Property and Fiscal Office on Camp Robinson. So that was there. It's just that I hadn't been educated in that. And so although I had fun and I had my computers and I had my gadgets, that's not what I was educated in. So that's what I just kind of left that on the side. So this guy was actually offering me for the first time a big girl job, doing something that I really liked to do that I didn't think that I was supposed to do for a career. And so 11 years at Children's, it was the best job. I had a little bit of everything. I again was hired as not as an attorney, but because I was an attorney, I worked with legal, I worked with HR, I worked with IT, did a little bit of everything. Children's is a big organization, and I would still, my daughter actually had kidney surgery about 4 years ago, and went to Children's for that. So even though I'm not there, they're the best. They are huge and they go fast, and I was stressed, and lots of other things happening. Family. My daughter is dyslexic. That takes a whole another world of parenting and teaching your child to be their own best advocate when you're not there. And so I left Children's in 2017, and wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And but I don't believe in coincidences either. And I don't know if we've changed the slide. We haven't. So some of you may have heard this. My son even has it on a T-shirt. Basically, what is it? Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn instead of lose. And I was learning. And about 2 weeks later, several of my friends called and said, you're a different person. And I'm like, you're right, I am. And I needed it. I needed to step back and figure out what I was going to do. So I consulted for a year. I got called by some people in North Carolina at Novant Health Systems. They had some fabulous problems. They had a foundation they needed to be reorged. They had data they didn't know what to do with. They had computer systems they didn't know how to put the data in. They needed bylaws written. They needed policies and procedures. It was the best thing in the world for me. And they needed a consultant. And some of you may know that you pay a consultant to do something that probably the guy sitting next to you could have done, but people believe what the consultant says because you're paying them. So there were people that were there who knew exactly. So that's kind of it's also a fine line to walk, because you walk in and there's people who go, well, that's what I've been telling them. Like, I know, but I'm gonna help you tell them, and then you do it. So it was great. Did that for a year. It told me, it brought me back to, remind you what you're good at doing, what you like to do, and that you can do some of the things you like to do without being so stressed out that your hair falls out. A year into that, I went to Carti. And to be their COO, kind of the same story, only a much smaller scale. They needed to revamp the foundation. It needed new life in it. And so they hired a new president. Then the president started hiring new staff. And about a month in, she asked me, the president, asked me to go interview this person. Y'all know who it is. For the VP job for the foundation. Mallory and I met at 8:30 a.m. at Panera Bread. Never had met her before. We left after lunch, after they were cleaning the tables. I didn't know then, but I was meeting with the person who had become one of my best friends and my business partner. But what we did know already was that we had the same love languages, the ones that we couldn't talk to our husbands about. And so for the next 2 years, we talked data, spreadsheets, technology. It's how we both had always done our work. It's what drove us, even though it's not what we thought we were going to do. And she will tell you to this day that when she left in March, a week before COVID, and you got out of a lot of stuff, because I had to wear all kinds of PPE at Carti after that, that I was going to follow her. And I am stubborn, and I didn't think that was really the case. And on May 8th, I walked out of Carti, and I went to Mallory's house, and she had Sonic Dr. Pepper, corn dog, and tots waiting on me. And then we walked upstairs to her office, and we started working on Data-Driven Partners. And Data-Driven Partners was not then what it is now. And you've mentioned it, come up here. It was Mallory's idea, and we had kind of 2 lines.
Yep.
We thought we were going to, in fact, she filed Data-Driven Philanthropy and Data-Driven Partners. And we thought we were going to be able to help people with philanthropy do things with their data that we knew how to do, and we knew that there was a better way to do it than even we were doing it. Like Mallory's talked about her spreadsheet program, which is awesome, but what we're doing now is awesomer if you have the, I think, sorry. And we knew that we could help people. Then we also had the data-driven partner side, and one of the things that we don't do very much of now, partly because we had this program with the conductor, which encouraged us to, kind of narrow down our focus and figure out what we could 10x. But we had another side, which was to take data from a company and help them look at their data. And so we still currently have a law firm that we are managing their financial data for their boards. We have a person who is sports injury data, which is so much fun. What else? Is that it?
That's all.
That's it right now?
That's all.
And then we have lending leads, which didn't even start out as lending leads.
That's right. So we have collectively 33 years of philanthropy experience behind us. And as Carlisle said, we thought we'd stay in that lane. We both know how to build customized cloud-based dashboards, the super fancy things up in the sky. So we thought
Up there in that cloud.
So we thought that we would go about the business of saying, hey, you have a company, you don't have a BI team, you have data, it's probably in terrible shape. Let us clean it up. You tell us what you want to measure. We'll turn it into this thing in the sky that helps you work smarter, that helps you, cuts down your administrative time, and that helps you see if you're successful in what you're trying to do. So that's what we thought we would do, right? And in order to show people what we meant by cloud-based, customized cloud-based, not a vendor that's already out there, not the canned reports that you get with whatever.
Salesforce or,
Right.
yep.
Whatever you want, right? Like that was going to be our thing. So we got our hands on as much data as we could find, thankfully free data. And we started building examples so that we could have some external facing dashboards that when we got on a Zoom call with you, we could say, this is what we could do, but if that's not important to you, beef snob, we could measure what you want to measure, right? So,
And remember, this is during COVID.
yes, so we Zoom called, I mean, all over the place. One of the data sets that we got our hands on was mortgage data. We started playing around with it, building, and then we both called our friends in banking because we have a lot of friends in banking. And thankfully, they had enough regard for us to say, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And it wasn't, hey, will you buy this from us? It was our market research. It was, hey, what do you use? What does it do? What are your favorite things about it? What is it missing? What are your problems that you encounter as a mortgage lender, as a banker? How do you spend your time administratively that makes you want to put your head through the wall?
What
If we could
keeps you from
design
sleeping
this
at night?
thing that would help you be more productive, what components would it have? And so we probably talked to 8 to 10 people in banking, and as we built it, we would show them our product and we would go back and change it and all that. So we were in the product development mode for about 9 months, but we did not, trust me, have 40-hour work weeks. We hoofed it.
Because we were also, in order to afford to do this, working for some nonprofits to clean their data. So
Yeah.
they'd call and say, we heard that you know Razor's Edge, which is their big thing, and we can't get our data to, so we do a data day. So we were doing some of that too at the same time, and cleaning data is fun,
It is fun.
but messy. Go ahead, start.
So, so what we know that we have done, and we know that we've done this because this is what's selling our product. We have developed, we listened to that feedback, and we heard people say things like, we need to know who the best loan officers are. I need an easy way to know. I'm moving into Fayetteville, and I need to know who I need to go hire. Or,
Our bank examiners are, it's CRA, is Community Reinvestment Act, and there are a lot of banks that have got to mirror the communities that they're in. And so if there are low-income census tracts in those communities, they need to be lending. How do we know that? Do y'all have anything about low to mod income or qualified opportunity zones or historically underutilized business zones, hub zones?
So we listened, and we listened to their problems, and we've developed what we like to say, it's a gap-filling solution. So it answers those 3 big questions that our market research posed to us, and then some. So we built it, we launched March 1st of this year, and yesterday rolled out our 6th bank, and we have a verbal from our 7th. So we're super excited about that. We call that a very successful year. We could not have done it without our friends in banking that helped us develop the product. And we could not have done it without the 10X program, because she's right. That program is amazing, and it made us slow down, think, focus. And another thing that it helped us do is say, okay guys, how are you gonna 10X? We knew then that we had some infrastructure issues that we needed to work on. So we took a step back from selling, even though someone in the back of the room told me that I needed to keep that drumbeat going.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what we've done now, where we are today, December 8th, is we have more data in Arkansas than we've ever had. We have a goal and we have a path to having more data in Arkansas than we've ever had. So we are en route to having more of a statewide presence than we do today. And our goal is to start expanding throughout the region. And we believe that we can do that. We want to move the way our customers want us to move, but we also, like you said earlier, we're going to have to hire some people. And so we have put ourselves in a position to scale, and that scaling should happen pretty quickly.
And at some point in time, we actually hope that will scale to the point, and it will be steady, that we can do some of those other things that are fun. I made it sound nasty to be cleaning data, but it is, especially if it's for a nonprofit, it's still near and dear to our hearts, and we still know that we don't know that you might be a good donor to a particular institution if they don't have the right data on you, right?
Right.
And everything runs on data, and so that's someday. So we hope to go,
Wait.
but right now, but right now, lending leads. Somebody's flushing something. Lending leads is our baby,
It's our baby.
and not to sell it, but we'd be happy to show anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really fun too, because we are local, and we have heard from our clients how nice it is for them to have access to someone. And we jokingly say, you know, everybody has our cell phone numbers, because they do. So we have 60 people in the state since March that are using our product for prospecting, for making data-driven decisions, for the identification of prospects in really strategic territories. And we're really proud of that. Because they have our cell phone numbers, they use them. And when they say, ooh, it would sure be great if y'all could do this, guess what they do? They call us. And so far, the improvements that we've made to our products have been because of their feedback. And guess what that means to them? It means that we're listening. And we're not just a vendor, we're a partner. So anyway, with all that said, what are we missing?
We have been able to, I'm thinking of one particular user who probably never thought at his ripe old age that he would be using a computer program. That's how easy ours is to use.
Yes.
And he loves it and calls us quite often to tell us all the fun things he does.
Yes.
What else?
We jokingly say, so one of the things about our product, Lending Leads, there are other vendors out there that are property detail related and, you know, history about the property, that are all like those kinds of details, real estate details. And our product is more of a relationship-based tool, because we are relationship-based people. So we can give you deep intel on who's borrowing from whom, down to a zip code level. We get super granular.
Times.
And we also kind of joke and say that we're kind of like the People magazine of mortgage data.